We ready to roll? Ready to roll? All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the July Governance and Audit Committee meeting. Derek, would you please call roll?
Please confirm your attendance after I state your name. Director Wilson? Director Gardner? Thank you. We have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek. First, we will have the committee agenda items. Item 2025-6 is recommended that the committee review and receive the retail desk transfer review report. Amy Summers will provide information on this item.
Good afternoon. So Governance and Audit reviewed the transfer of the retail desk as it moved from the outside contractor to in-house within Indigo's finance group. First, we performed a secondary review by meeting with the new retail service supervisor of the retail desk, as well as met with the revenue accountant in the finance department. It was noted that the reconciliations performed by the retail desk matched with the deposit totals on the bank statement for the dates that we selected. And also there were no differences between the deposits reported to accounting by the retail desk. So that seemed to be a smooth transition for the periods of time we looked at, which was May of this year. So next, we reviewed if there were any significant changes made during the transition period. And it was determined that additional spreadsheets were created by the new management that included a more robust way to track more immediate inventory and levels and quantities to help project future pass on hand inventory needs and requirements. So it was, it's more real time and we can kind of project out what was being needed for future, for past inventory. And as we also observed, there were vast improvements from the prior old tracking documentation being maintained. There was notable improvements with the cash drawer accuracy and variance were lessened from what we could see. Thirdly, we also reviewed the training that the new management and staff received during the transition. Noted there were a 5-week overlap period between the new supervisor utilizing the prior contractor's training. Basically, they shared with us that the training was a little lacking and maybe a little insufficient for the day-to-day duties, but based on his background that he was bringing, it equipped him to be able to make those appropriate modifications, as like I noted that we saw where he had created a lot of new spreadsheets for kind of real-time tracking. So that seemed to be good. Finally, Governance and Audit examined the current staffing levels with the retail desk area, noted that they brought 2 of the 3 over from the prior contractor. So now they're employees of Indigo. So there was a little bit less of a learning curve on that because they brought them over. And these individuals have been trained on those new kind of processes that the new supervisor put into place. So looks like it's running really smooth during the transition. Per discussion with the supervisor, though, there I think is one current open position in the group, and that's basically to cover additional weekend and later evening shifts to help, with the workflow there. So as far as recommendations are concerned, we really don't have anything other than continuing on with the new processes implemented and looking for ways to streamline the process. So there's not really anything we're seeing necessary to recommend at this time.
Did we do?
Oh, I was going to ask for questions. So you're in.
Did we look at any like internal controls or do they have any metrics or KPI and stuff yet? It's so new.
There are processes in place, but there nothing like no written processes, if that's what you're talking about. But there's definitely internal controls surrounding that retail desk environment. Yeah.
And you tested those?
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I needed. Thanks.
No problem.
And Amy, we're also comfortable with the staffing levels as proposed?
It seems to be working. Like I said, there's an additional need. They're seeing maybe projecting out in the future to cover weekends and maybe staying open a little later or whatever they want to do at the CTC. But currently it's operating, appropriate for the need.
Okay, but that'll be something where the team is continuing to track. as we
Yeah.
go.
These guys, does this now report to you? Does this retail transfer now report to you? Oh, to Cesar? You're comfortable with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I
Okay.
don't think so. Thanks, Amy. Next up, item 2025-7 recommends that the committee review and receive the compensation management plan review report. Brian Atkinson will provide information on this item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Brian Atkinson, Director of Governance and Audit here at Indigo. Part of our internal work plan for the year 2025 included a compensation management review. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So we looked at various objects and scopes regarding the policies, procedures, and controls related to compensation management. It included time card reporting and approval, disability payments, workman's comp, extended leave time, and family medical leave and unpaid leave. And so out of our review, we came up with 3 observations, and 2 of those we rated as high and 1 as a medium. Those 3 observations included unpaid leave with accrued time available. The second one was sick lists not being consistently managed across the organization. And then the last was we rolled together short-term disability, long-term disability, and workers' compensation payments. If we could go to the next slide, please. Our first observation was unpaid leave with accrued available time. We rated this as high. We determined that Indigo has several employees using time off without pay, even though in many instances they have paid time off available in the way of like vacation or sick time. And so we thought that would be a kind of a conflict to be able to approve time without pay and you have a vacation bank put away. So out of that, we tracked individuals that were under this policy, and we determined that between January 1st and May 31 of 2025, there was excused time off without pay totaling 5,904 hours. And of those individuals that had that 5,000 hours, they all had vacation banks put away to save for a later time. So, yes.
Can I have the inclusive with you, what were the dates with this 5,000?
So, yes, so this was between January 1 and May 31 of this year, 2025. It was a total of 53 individuals who took time off without pay, even though they had vacation hours banked. And so we determined that that would be not only is that a conflict with the fact that they're taking time off without pay, they're also receiving Indigo benefits, the same as anyone who's working full-time. So they're not being paid for the time, but they still have the same benefit as somebody working full-time. And we determined that of those 53 individuals that took time off without pay, all of which were coach operators or former coach operators. So that we know causes probably some severe scheduling problems for our transportation department. We did note that the payroll department reported that employees are not required to use a full shift increment of paid time off if they're using paid time off. And we determined that conflicts with the collective bargaining agreement that says a person that's under that in that group, a representative employee must use 8 hours of sick time, for example, if they took his time off. So that was kind of a conflicting thing that we found happening. Our recommendations were to create an additional training for supervisors in managing time to revise the collective bargaining agreement to match the policies and procedures that are in place using accrued time off and requiring people to use required time off rather than take time off without pay and saving their time off. the management response on that was the Department of People will perform training for supervisors, managers, and directors and to review the CBA policies and procedures, and they expect to be able to do that within 2 to 4 months from now. We also suggested additional training for supervisors and who have employees who are represented employees to understand the rules and regulations regarding the collective bargaining agreement with usage of time and how that's applied. And so that is an additional training that the Department of People said that could be done within 2 to 4 months. We also suggested that all time approvers should be instructed to refrain from approving leave without pay when they know their employees have a bank of time available for vacation, et cetera. And so that is supposed to take place by the end of 2026 to look at the collective bargaining agreement and to train staff and then train supervisors who are approving time. We also suggested that the collective bargaining agreement be reviewed and changed to make sure that the practices in place on using the leave time match what the contract says. And that will be part of negotiations that happen in 2026, is what we were told by management. And the last thing that we suggested was to remove the requirement of using sick time in 8-hour increments. We felt that that could help with scheduling in the transportation department and then the garage for maintenance. So the status on that from the Department of People, they would meet with those departments to determine if it would be a benefit or not be a benefit to require employees to be a full 8-hour shift off. For example, if you went to the dentist appointment and you took a sick time, you have to use a full 8 hours rather than a partial day. That may create problems to do partial days with scheduling drivers. I'm not sure, but that's one of the things that they can work out with our transportation group. It might be helpful to be able to let people do partial days. Any questions on unpaid leave?
So,
Okay.
go ahead.
Oh,
You're the chairman, go ahead.
yep. Brian, this is one I was a little disappointed to obviously see. You said training will start like immediately on the top 2 items. I just want to make sure I'm.
Yeah, the Department of People, as part of the management response, said that they intend to start training on what things for managers to be looking at on approving time, on time off, and how it's being utilized. And they expect to have that done within 2 to 4 months.
Okay, and then the other training you mentioned that'll happen by 2026.
So that would also be in compliance with the new collective bargaining agreement. So based upon what changes come out of that, they would train people with, and that negotiation is to take place in 2026.
Gotcha. I'm tracking.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I might not have
Thank you.
expressed that very well.
Yep.
Any other questions on unpaid leave with accrued time?
So I guess so if you said it was $5,000 and 53 people, so that's like 94.3 hour average. That's like 2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do they accrue that much? They can't have that many dentist appointments.
So they're using time off without pay and not using their sick time or vacation time in these instances. So in other words, I may be saving my vacation for something in the fall and request time off now, and I take time off without pay now. The problem is, admittedly, we're not paying them. The problem is they're also having the same benefits on insurance and other programs as the person who's working full time
Right.
and using their
And using
vacation.
their vacation time.
Yes.
Okay, I got it now. All right, thanks.
Does that make sense?
Doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it does now, thanks.
Any other questions on this one?
No.
Our next observation was the management of the sick list, and we rated this one as a high. And we've determined that there's kind of a lack of understanding on the sick leave policy as it ties to the collective bargaining agreement. And we determined that it's not technically managed the same from one department as to another. But we have areas in the company where it's not an issue at all, and we have areas in the company where it is an issue. And so what we determined from reading the CBA was that there's an attendance policy in section 57 that contains an extended leave policy, and that allows people, it's called a 12-month rule, that they could be on extended leave for under this 12-month rule. So the rules say that if an employee is out of work for more than 3 days, they must provide a doctor's statement to come back to work, which is supposed to be managed. But it also requires that if they're out for more than 7 days, every 7 days to call in to a supervisor. But we found that we have some employees who are out for an extended period of time that includes weeks and months. So whether they're always calling in the 7 days, we couldn't verify that. So there's a rule in this collective bargaining agreement that talks about a verifiable. And that means that an employee can call in and they use what's called a verifiable. And depending upon the department where someone works is how it's understood and managed. So on this 12-month rule, they do not have to have a family medical leave intact. A verifiable means they get 4 of those per year, and they can take off time using sick time, or they can take off time with vacation time, or they can take off time and not be paid at all. But they can have an excused absence without pay with a verifiable. We also found that the rule in this collective bargaining agreement says on the next page, please, yeah, next slide at the top, a verifiable can be used for multiple days consecutively. In some instances can be allowed for an employee to be off for months. So they can just call in and say, I'm on a verifiable. They may not have sick time. That's okay. They go off payroll, but they're still considered employed. Then we looked at family medical leave, and we just were kind of curious where we stand to other organizations on our family medical leave. And we believe that we kind of have an unusual high population of employees who are on FML status. We also determined that the collective bargaining agreement in the section 26 conflicts with the current practice regarding the use of accrued leave with employee on FML. So one area says, well, you have to use all of our sick time if we're on FML first before we go out of payroll status, but that's not what the collective bargaining agreement is written pretty vaguely, that you could have an argument that that's not a requirement. So the 2 charts I provided were for 2024 and for January to May of 2025, just to give you an idea. I based this on 40-hour work week, and we determined that these are the different types of hours that family medical leave are in place. And it equals in 2024, 9.81 FTEs are gone on family medical leave. And currently so far this year through May, we have 11.88 FTEs gone on family medical leave. So our conclusion on this was that Indigo probably needs to improve on ensuring individuals on the short-term and long-term disability are not supplementing their income also. So we determined that you can be on short-term disability, long-term disability, and that's through an insurance company who manages that for us. So obviously, if I'm going to have surgery, maybe it's suggested that I do an application for short-term, long disability. And so that's set up through our contracted insurance company. Well, I may have sick time on the books that would cover my time off. So in one instance, we had an employee come and say they received their short-term disability check, but they were also on sick leave. So if we could go back one more page, to the backwards, sorry. Our recommendations were to revise the CBA for consistency in the various usages of accrued time. We would suggest that the concept of verifiables be removed from the collective bargaining agreement. And the management response was that would be an item for negotiation in the 2026 collective bargaining agreement negotiations. It is creating problems and headaches throughout being able to maintain our workforce level that we need. We also suggested that maybe our Department of People could meet with our FML, Family Medical Leave Management Contractor, to determine where we stand. Are the policies that they're putting in place when they are managing our family medical leave what we're expecting to be happening? And secondly, we asked that maybe they meet with those people and look at where we stand on a national average. Is our 10 to 11 FTEs off on FML higher than most places are our same size? So that's one of the things that we suggested. So most of these items, the response was that they could be negotiation items next year in the collective bargaining agreement. And then meeting with the insurance company, they definitely determined could be done by October 31 of 2025, and then improve some of this better monitoring levels. we did suggest that monitoring leave time for somebody on family medical leave be done in the Department of People rather than by an individual supervisor in their department. And that's already been put in place by them. They did that in April. Any questions on the sick list management?
I don't think I have any
Could
questions.
you
Any?
define what a I don't think I understand what this verifiables.
So that's very confusing, and it's confusing to Indigo's management too in different departments. So how it's being managed in one area is if I call in as an employee and say, I'm taking a verifiable, which means I can have 4 of those a year. And the contract says that it doesn't have a specific time period. So I could use a verifiable and be off work maybe 6 weeks. And maybe I have time to pay myself out of sick or vacation. Maybe I don't have any time and I'm taking time off without pay. So I'm still an employee, still on the benefits roster, but I am not being paid. Secondly, the rule says that I'll use a coach operator for an example. When they have the annual, I think it's done quarterly, jump in somebody from transportation if I'm wrong, when they pick their routes and schedules, they have to be in place at work to do that. So they can call back in, report to work with their doctor's statement, do the pick. Maybe they don't like the pick they got. They could still have 3 more verifiables to use in the year and call off and not come to work. I know.
You don't have to have, if you say I'm using this verifiable, don't you have to be sick? Doesn't have to be a reason? I mean, you have to be sick?
Well, it says they're supposed to call in every 7 days. They get a doctor's statement that says they can come back to work. They have to have a statement that says they can return to work.
But you don't have to have anything that says this is why you can't come to work?
It's what I've discovered, it wasn't managed the same throughout the organization.
Okay. All right. Well, I still don't understand. Oh, okay. Maybe you can help me understand this.
Is your mic on? Thank you.
Samansky, the Labor Relations Manager. Good afternoon. So the verifiables, if you look in the action plan, part of the education for all the supervisors and directors who are allowing this practice, what we found out is upon return from verifiable, they're supposed to provide a medical note from their doctor saying they were not able to perform the duties while on that verifiable. We don't know if that's been happening. And that's part of the education and training that we're going to do to educate. Because if they come back and they don't have that medical note, I don't know what the consequences at that time, but they should probably have a discipline of some type. So that verifiables is very confusing in the contract, and that's part of many aspects of the CBA that we need to clarify and clean up at next negotiations. But yeah, the verifiables, right now we can put a stop to that and make sure supervision is aware that upon return and getting the 7-day updates from the individuals, that needs to be enforced right away.
I don't understand. Somebody can call up their supervisor and say, I'm going to be verifiable. And they don't have to tell them I'm going to be verifiable for 2 days or 2 months or.
Know what the original
And
intent.
why wouldn't we require them to have a doctor's note on the front end as well as one saying, okay, whatever the condition that this person had is now resolved and they can return to work? I mean, I just.
I'm still learning myself because that's the language that's in there now. And it's been very vague, as Brian mentioned, and it's very confusing. So that's part of our job when we get to negotiations to clean that up for sure. But we could probably put a policy in place now that says if you are going to go on a verifiable, we need a reason possibly, but it does say in there upon return, you need to prove it was a medical reason. And I don't even know if we can, I'd have to find out more about the medical stuff
Okay.
requesting that information.
All right, well, when riding a dead horse, best strategy is to dismount, I guess.
It's definitely proven to be a scheduling nightmare for our transportation department.
Do we have a sense of what the original intent for this concept was?
I don't know at this time.
We have,
Okay. It's like we're unraveling a puzzle here.
Good afternoon, Aaron Vogel, COO Indigo. I was sitting back trying to see myself actually, because this is quite an interesting one. So the original intent is, it's kind of a wild card for the union, one. And two, when an employee calls in, they're calling in and basically saying, I'm going to call in, but it's justifiable. But when they call into a supervisor is not authorized to get into HIPAA-related things, into their medical conditions. So the supervisor is not asking any questions, which is to why Tom mentioned, when they return, now they have to show all that paperwork and proof. Again, the supervisor managing that employee is not exposed and accessible to their HIPAA records and their personal medical records, right? So if someone went off and said, I'm on a verifiable for FMLA medical leave, that supervisor has no right to be asking medical questions. So it's part of our organization and how we manage the call-offs and how we have so many employees. It is quite interesting because to Brian's point, it is managed a little bit differently between departments. Some departments that have 2 or 3 people, they know their employees. Like if my employees call in, I know exactly what my 5 direct reports are calling in for. If you start having 100 people call in, I can't keep track of what their personal states are. So originally it's kind of a wild card is how it was created. And then it's also to protect HIPAA related information on the individual that is calling off and saying, it's excusable. We'll deal with the rationale, whether it's excused or not, and how you're paid after the fact. Administrative work.
Aaron, can you maybe share what the likelihood is next year that this would be something we could negotiate? I mean, is this, maybe that's asking something we don't want to get into.
I don't see us, it's very cumbersome. It's very administratively burdened, both on my department and Department of People, and the likelihood of negotiating out of this is very unrealistic. I mean, there's some things related to medical records. We're just not going to be changing that sort of thing. And this is a very institutionalized program in a union environment that I see here and other organizations. And I just don't see that. If we do, great, awesome. But I would bet on
I
not.
don't understand what the HIPAA, if we are asking an employee who's going to do this verifiable thing, to have, I'll give you an example. I had to take short-term, I had to take a lot of time off for an injury that I had. And I had to provide to the Defense Department a letter from my physician stating that I could not, perform the duties of my job, duties and responsibilities of my job for the next 4 weeks. Then state in there, that I had broken my hip. It just said that, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't sit for 4 weeks. So I couldn't sit at my desk. So I couldn't do my job. And they were fine with that.
Correct.
So why can't we do the same thing? Say, have a medical doctor say this person cannot perform the duties and responsibilities of their position for the next X days, weeks, or months.
We do that, but we do it reactively reactively. Because if someone wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're supposed to report at 5 a.m. They don't know that they torn their meniscus, right? And they can't walk, therefore they can't drive. So they're calling in at 3:30 a.m. now that they're awake and saying, hey, supervisor, I've got a verifiable, I got to go to the doctor. I'm not going to be in at 5 o'clock. They're using that verifiable so they don't use their bank of vacation and sick leave time.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
It's a big gray area.
So it's not necessarily that they're going to be taking a significant amount of time off.
Correct.
They may just be taking a day or two. But they're using
Absolutely.
this verifiable.
Absolutely. Could be a day. And in
Got it.
extreme cases, like Brian mentioned, there is some abuse. With every program and leave policy, there's some abuse in there. And he highlighted some of those.
Got it. Okay. I'm fine.
Is that clear as mud?
Yep, clears it all up. Okay, thanks. Clear as mud, right?
the suggestion to remove it from the contract or maybe at least tighten it up because it says there's a no, it's going to be an extended time period with no specific end date. And we did determine from the extended leave list that I was provided when I asked for it, there were 58 employees on that list. That's a big chunk.
Extended leave?
Yeah, extended leave list.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, thanks, Aaron.
Any questions more on the extended leave list? So this was a difficult review to do and there's a lot of meat to it. The next one was short-term, long-term disability. I hit on that a little bit. I had mentioned before that in 2024, a non-represented employee received disability benefits in addition to their sick pay. They came forward to Indigo and said, hey, I got this check in the mail from the insurance company, but I'm also on payroll because I have sick time. So they turned it back in. We believe what's happening is if there's an expected leave time due to a medical procedure, they are requested to complete a short-term disability application. And that's probably what got the ball rolling. It goes to our insurance company and they automatically assign that person for short-term disability. And our payroll department wouldn't know if somebody's getting insurance checks compared to them also using their sick time, because what would make sense is to use your sick time first. So we suggested that Indigo start managing the people who are on medical leave, short-term disability, long-term disability, and instead of like an employee's supervisor approving their time card because they know that they're using sick time, that be transferred to the Department of People and that they manage it because they would know the list of people who are on short-term or long-term disability, and then they could do the approval and review of the time cards. So the management response to that was, after we got this started, they've already put that practice in place in April. And so anybody who's on one of these disability plans or a workers' compensation plan, they're managing the time cards of the employees. So we're not getting a double dip. And what was, there was an unclear term in the collective bargaining agreement that says that an employee can use their sick time in addition to insurance benefits. It doesn't specify if it's long-term benefits, short-term disability benefits, or just their medical insurance. So we suggested that part of the review of the collective bargaining agreement is that be tightened up and made more clear. So that would be part of the negotiations in 2026 as well.
So I guess union stuff is not my forte. But could we not tighten this stuff up via policy?
I would have to defer to legal.
But we're not changing the terms of the contract. We're just instituting a policy that says you got to do this, 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 and this within the terms of the contract. I mean, maybe that's something for Bob to learn.
I think I'd prefer to have Bob. It's also not my forte. But it is a contract, so we have to be pretty cautious about changing the terms of it. I'll leave it at that.
I do know they're taking our suggestions from this report. The Department of People has it, and they're going to use that when they start negotiations with our labor representative. I met with him, and they definitely have a list of things that they would like to work and iron out and tighten up. Is that fair to say? We have folks here from the Department of People. Thank you. Any other questions on the leave time and compensation management plan? I apologize. It's a long report and there was a lot of data that we went through to compile it, but we felt it was necessary and it shed some light on some things that are struggles for different areas in the organization.
Thanks, Brian. I think next up we have item 2025-8, which is to recommend that the committee review and receive the criminal background check review report. Amy Summers will provide information on this item.
Okay, so Governance Audit performed the review of the processes surrounding the criminal background checks with regards to them being done for both our contractors as well as Indigo new hires. And that's prior to their onboarding and commencement of work here. The audit work plan for 2025 included a scope of review, but based on the need to audit on-site contractor criminal background checks and a particular individual performing these checks, it created a higher sense of urgency for us to kind of begin that work early. So there were two observations noted during our review, one pertaining to the contractor criminal background checks and the other related to Indigo employee background checks. And an overall rating was given as a high to this review. The first observation was for the contractor checks, background checks. For these, it was noted that Indigo Life Safety and Security performs criminal background checks for all contractors working on site here at an Indigo facility. The purpose is to rule out any prior criminal activity that would conflict with would conflict with the services being contracted and to ensure the safe place compliance here. Indigo uses ADP system to run these background checks, and the system checks all criminal records for that contractor. It was noted that due to handwriting errors on manual forms, information was not being accurately input to the system. The system does not show if an error is actually received if no one, especially if like no one exists for that information that was input. Instead, it will report just no criminal activity or no criminal records were received for that individual. And a test was performed that was actually input incorrect data to the system, like it was like tester tested, like as a name, and then social security number, I think was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that came back as cleared. So that clearly is a bit of a flaw in the records we were getting, because if there's nobody that exists, that it comes back as pretty much cleared or complete. So based on that test performed, it was interpreted that the individuals have in fact been cleared. So and then you can see on the chart on the next page that there was a lot of data being reviewed for 2023, 2024, and 2025. And it was basically, we did the review for one particular individual that was pulling those background checks. And the error rates on what was tested in 2023 was 7.4 error rating. And that was all the paper files that we looked at that were on site for the contractor. And we looked at 8%, or we had an error rate of 8% of the, I think it was 19%. Yeah, that we reviewed for 2024. And that was just the online stuff. So there were errors there too. But then it jumps up to about 60% of what was tested by life safety and security on 2025. So it's a significant jump in error rates on what was being input to the system. So we were getting a lot that were just going through, but it was incorrect information being input. So we were able to clear some of those, but it's still just an incredible significant number of errors that were being made of what was input. So based on that, our recommendations were creating or utilizing a fillable PDF file form that will have the contractor complete it to make sure that will hopefully help eliminate any errors in interpreting handwriting, 2 looks like an 8 on there or whatever it was. And then if a form like this isn't used, our recommendation is that they return the form to the contractor, have them redo it, and kind of basically update it and then provide it back to us for resubmission to be able to pull that background check. And then management stated that they have implemented that process to prevent similar errors from occurring in the future. The contractor is now required to submit all paperwork through the eBuilder software system or whatever. And it is not, if it's not completed correctly or accurately, the submission will be rejected, and then it will be sent back to the contractor to correct and then resubmit as well. So that's already been implemented and corrected since the time we ended the audit. And then a secondary review or spot check should be performed by a member of life safety and security for all contractors currently on site. Management stated that they're currently working on some staffing changes, and a security specialist will perform those spot checks. And it won't be the same person that actually is requesting or ordering that background check. So there's going to be a segregation of duties there. So the secondary check will, won't be the same person going, oh, I filled that out correctly. So, and that's also been implemented and corrected since the time of the audit. And I do want to make mention that the individual who had those significant error rates, they are no longer with Indigo. So that's been remediated and corrected too. So that's good news. And the second observation relates to Indigo employee criminal background checks. And I'm
Amy,
sorry.
before we go to there,
Okay.
this, on this contractor one, it appears that, you can, oh, for crying out loud. It appears that these errors can clear somebody. Is the reverse also true? If if you type in Richard H. Wilson and it comes back that I've got a criminal history, and if you type in Richard H. Wilson Jr., I come back clear. Is
Well,
that-
and that's part of the problem. So that when they were submitting those forms, they might use, and correct me if I'm wrong, they might use a nickname, or they might put it in as this, or they might have, you might put it in as Rick Wilson, but your social security last 4 digits are transposed,
Right.
or your birth date isn't accurate. Well, if you had a criminal history, it might not pull it because you've input, or we've input, or on our side, input incorrect information based on handwriting issues or whatever information you gave us.
Okay,
So-
so it's not the system
No,
fault, it's.
there's just no flag on the system that says, hey, there's no record for anybody that matches this information.
Okay,
So that's part of the error, is kind of not even on our side. It's just, it doesn't have the ability to say,
So is there a-
we are not getting any hits on anybody and this person doesn't exist. So,
is there a more reliable platform, to?
no,
Mark? I
I
mean-
don't believe so, but you might, oh, y'all might be able to speak to it a little bit better, but,
Good afternoon. Mark Emmons, Director of Life Safety and Security. It happens with any program that you would put a background check in, just like if I was, to give you a good example, I applied for a gun permit. I had to supply a background check. This is when you had to. For some reason, it showed me as a female. So when they ran my background check, I cleared as a female, even though my name was Mark Allen Emmons. So they gave me my permit. I went back, told them that it was a mistake, and they said, oh, it must have been in the system. So unfortunately, there's no, and to give an example for you, if you would have put Richard Wilson and it came back as clear, and your name is really Rick Wilson, it would have came back. Or vice versa. If your name is Rick, or if your name was Richard and you put Rick, it would have came back clear because Rick Wilson. Now, had you come back as say there was a criminal thing, we would take that form and we would supply it back and say, hey, this came back as a hit. We need to verify that all the information on this form is correct, or do we need to rerun it? And then it'll work that way.
So Mark, let me ask you this question, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because I don't want to take up a lot of time, but can we require these people to give their full legal name? Because if they were charged, right, if there's a court file or a police file, it would be their full legal name, right?
So
Along with any known aliases.
back keeps going in and out. I don't want to do like another, but anyway, the form is required. When you fill it out, the form asks for your full legal name. It
Oh, it
asks for,
does.
it does, full legal name, any aliases you may have used in the past. And that's for like, a female that may have gotten married that's changed their last name, or if you've went to court and had your name changed, it's looking for aliases. So that's all on there. And the last part of it is when they sign it, they're saying that everything is truthful. So there could be steps that we could take. We'd have to talk internally that if the information they supplied was incorrect when they supplied the form, that we don't accept it at all. So those are some things that we could also look at as well.
Okay, all right, thanks very much. Thanks for, sorry for taking up so much time.
Got to get your questions out, Rick.
Okay, the second observation relates to the Indigo employee criminal background checks. Governance audit reviewed those to ensure background checks are being done prior to onboarding and when the employee begins work here at Indigo. Applicant was required to input their information to the ADP system, which that actually helps on our side is that they had that form already in place. So it's, they sign a consent that we can run a background check and they do all the input of their information. So that kind of helps eliminate those interpreting of handwriting errors and all of the other things that we saw on the contractor side. And then that also puts that ownership onto them as well as to being the applicant, and that information is also kind of bumped up and matched against their application as well as their I-9 employment eligibility verification documentation. So the department people noted that they don't track necessarily the documentation to indicate that a background checks when they come back have actually been reviewed in their group. There's really nothing that they had that is able to track it through the system. It's basically just when they get back, the process is to review those. So upon checking with the Indiana Offender Registry, it was determined that 3 employees had a disqualifying background check based on Indigo's hiring criteria and their safe place qualifications. As a result of this, all 3 employees have been dispositioned and adverse action was processed. So they are no longer with Indigo. The department people does not currently have an SOP or a way to ensure that background checks are reviewed prior to that onboarding process. And they're actually reviewed by a Department of People staff member. So our recommendations include, as recommended, that the Department of People run all criminal background checks prior to onboarding to ensure there is no disqualifying criminal history. This should also include a method to identify that a subsequent review was performed on that background check that came back. And then a termination code, we thought would be a good idea that it be created in the system for if anybody has come back, that they have criminal history and they have been onboarded and that we do terminate them, that there be a termination code added to the system that kind of reflects what was done and that they had I guess a bad criminal background check that came back that forced their termination. So then we also recommended that we complete an audit an audit be completed to kind of reevaluate the criminal background checks for all hires during the past 2 years, ensuring compliance with our Indigo hiring criteria. And then create the SOP and a policy for the criminal background check process.
Amy, is our Department of People kind of staffed appropriately to assume the extra responsibilities we've kind of laid out in this? Do we feel?
Does the Department of People want to?
Come on up, Britt.
I mean,
Or Brian.
based on the recommendations and the response, I would assume we're
I just know that
marching
we've
in
had a
that
lot
direction.
kind of in transition and flux in that department. So I just want to make sure that we're.
Yeah, Brian Cook, Director of Talent Acquisition. So yes, the staffing for this division in this area is for onboarding is staffed appropriately. There's been checks and balances for this. So this process that she makes reference to stopped in May. So over the course of the last 3 months, there's been a tracker in place. We also utilized the ADP onboarding tracker, which does give us warnings. We cannot process an offer until everything is being.
That's no upgrade that they offer yet.
No, that is full-fledged, and we just turned it on. So it's active as of right now. And so we can basically double the throughput with this process with the staffing that we have.
Okay, okay. Thanks for that.
Can I follow? Are you
Yes,
done? Let me
please.
Follow up on something. In yet another manifestation of my declining youth, I can't recall if it was Britt or Brian that told me, but we had an issue with the I-9s where we had, that was you?
Mhm.
How does this issue with the background checks, and I'm confused, because the I-9 is the little form that says you're a citizen and you can work here, right?
At the end of the day, the tracker wasn't being used. So the validation for I-9s wasn't being executed. So as a result, when you input information, driver's license, and other identifying factors, there was no validation of that. Subsequently, the driver's license and everything else that has to do with validating their citizenship was never being was never being looked at.
Huh, okay.
Britt Griffin, Chief People Officer for the Department of People and Culture. Actually, there's additional pieces to that. An I-9 does not require that you have a driver's license. There are a number of IDs that you can submit, including a passport. You don't have to have a driver's license to use for I-9s. I won't go back in history to talk about the I-9s. I think we've discussed that. But I wanted to make sure it's clear is you don't have to have a driver's license to complete an I-9.
But I guess.
Just two parts of the required documents or one part of the.
They're not, in order to work for Indigo, you have to do an I-9 and you have to do a background check, but they're not mutually exclusive, right?
That is correct. You
Okay,
can
so-
work here and don't have a car, complete an I-9, and do not have a driver's license. So let me give a little bit more background. In the I-9 process, there are 3 columns. In column A, one of the items that's used, that I use, I drive to work every day and I've got a driver's license, is a passport. In column A, if you have one of those items, you don't require to use anything else. In column B, one of the items that they ask for is a driver's license, but you can also have a state ID as well and other items you have. So I want to make it clear is you do not have to have a driver's license to complete an I-9. It's just one of the many documents that you can use.
But even so, we still need to have I guess we do now have a process in place
Just for that.
to validate that
No.
whether it's column A, column B, or column C,
We have resolved
something
that.
has been presented that
Correct. And you
matches
presented
up with that.
And
Okay.
Brian presented that last.
So this is Brian Atkinson, Director of Governance and Audit. We provided that audit previously, and they do have that in place. The reason it was mentioned in this is that puts the ownership back on the applicant. So Amy mentioned that they have to fill out their application in ADP. They also have to do the criminal background check authorization. There's now something in place that makes sure those names match across all 3 of those papers. And their social security numbers match up, right, Brian? So that's what he was talking about when he turned on the checks and balances in the system. The ownership's on the person applying and they have to match.
So this is not the same I-9 issue.
Correct.
that
It's
we did last year. This is
correct.
a part of the process now.
That's correct. And that's so that the names match throughout all pieces.
Let me just add one more piece before we
Sure.
close. One of the things we've done, and I'll credit Brian and the team, is we've really looked at how we can change how we do work to be more effective and efficient. One of our pillars is operational excellence. We learned that some of these processes weren't used and the ADP system, some of the features were not turned on. Okay, so that's one. The second piece is another piece that we did not talk about of background checks. 2 of the key indicators of background checks, if there's another Rick Wilson, you also have to have the same Rick Wilson with the same social security number and date of birth. And they use those 2. Because there's other Rick Wilsons out there, but there's another Rick Wilson with the same date of birth, probably not. Same social security number, probably not.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's a part.
I guess my concern, Britt, was
Yeah.
it was not so much with like name, but like, let's just say you type in Richard Wilson and the social security is 123507924.
Yeah.
And they type 123057924,
That's an error,
right?
yeah.
And so there may be a social security number out there, but as I understood it, everything was coming back cleared because they didn't find a Rick Wilson with that social security number.
No, I think what Amy was saying is no matter what name you put in there, it's going to check it. And if there's nobody in the system, it'll come back clear, but it's not really clear. It just comes back with no record.
No record, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't say you didn't commit any crime. It just says there's nobody found. There's no record is how that comes back.
Got it, okay, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
It does, I'm sorry, Amy, what now?
It doesn't say that nobody's found. It just says, from my review of them, it just pretty much just shows no records. So it doesn't say nobody was found or whatever. It just basically says no record. Or there's no criminal record or
Okay.
whatever. So that would insinuate that there's been no criminal history on that, assuming the information was input correctly.
Yeah, I don't mean to harp on it or anything, but
I mean, it's
I'm really
definitely-
less concerned about it with Indigo employees because we have processes in place. The thing that really concerned me was the contractors. We got people coming in from outside, right? And so, I think I beat this horse enough. So I think we're good. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, so the management response was basically in agreement to over the next little bit, go through these and work to implement them. Also noted the associates who did not perform the review of those three terminated employees within the Department of People, they have also been terminated as well from employment and within the Department of People. So they've done their part in remediating the issue, but then it's also just to put that extra layer of, let's make sure they're,
Right.
it's only as good as it, like, they can produce it, we can get the record, but it's only as good as if you review the record there. So, okay. And they have a due date of Q3 of 2026 on this as far as getting all of those pieces put into place. So. And that's, of course, to get the SOP and everything all in place. So any other questions on this one?
As Rick said, I think we beat this one to death. Thanks, Amy. Next up is action item 2025-9 is to recommend that the committee review and receive the fixed asset review report. Brian Atkinson will provide this information.
Thank you,
Will
Mr.
provide
Chairman.
Information on this item.
Atkinson, Director of Governance and Audit. We're going to switch to good news. We, as part of our 2025 audits for the year, that included a fixed asset review. And so our scope of the work on this was to look at our disposal process with assets, our replacement insurance, are we depreciating our equipment correctly based on its useful life, and the record keeping for fixed assets. So we came up with those 4 observations, 3 of which we don't have a recommendation for, and 1 of which we have a low recommendation for. So if we can go to the next slide, please, the disposal process. So we reviewed the disposal process and determined that in most cases, Indigo disposes of an asset after it's passed the Federal Transit Authority's recommended useful life of the item. So we're using them to the full extent of their useful life. And the only example would be like of us disposing of something prior to the end of its useful life would be like, for example, an accident, if a vehicle was totaled or something that happened, a catastrophe with a particular item that it could not be repaired, then we would dispose of something before its useful life was met. We did determine that we're following the practice that when replacing a vehicle, for example, that has not met its useful life yet, let's use an example. If there's a bus accident and it gets totaled and we have an insurance payment for the item that was totaled, we then have to either turn over the money back to the Federal Transit Authority based upon the insurance payment that we received, or prove that we rolled it into a replacement for that vehicle. And we've determined that that's absolutely being taken care of. And so we're handling the disposals right in that recommendation, in that idea. We also determined that there's a process for disposing. It's determined, started at the department level. There's a form used. They put the data of the information of the vehicle or fixed asset, and then that goes through a process into finance and into our procurement department, which is part of finance, that handles the disposal. And for example, if it's something that is past useful life, then they look at the best way to dispose of it, whether it's put it on a government auction or if it's something that if we turn it in for recycling, which is the best. So we're meeting all of the FTA requirements on disposals, and we have a great system in place, and there's definitely a policy and procedure to take care of those.
What a like-kind exchange policy is?
So that's the FTA's rule, like, for example, if I'm let's lose a paratransit bus, for example, if one gets totaled and I replace it using the insurance money, plus I probably have to add to it, that's the like kind item that we're replacing. In
So
other
it's the
words,
same thing.
we don't replace a paratransit bus with a lift in the garage. It has to be a similar item.
Hey, Brian, what else falls under the category of fixed assets besides?
Well,
buses?
so when I get to later on, I've got a little example, okay? The next item, observation 2, is a record keeping of fixed assets. So this we have rated as low, and part of the fixed asset management is the federal government has started a program called Transit Asset Management, TAM. We've probably heard of that. And we suggested that right now Indigo has to manage the TAM process on spreadsheets. So in other words, our folks that manage that, they pull spreadsheets and send to a particular department, here's all the assets that we have for you. And you are to review it and determine is the state of good repair. And then that's compiled back together and reported to the federal government. So our suggestion was that we use a software tool for that piece. Now, with our Microsoft D365 ERP system, we manage fixed assets in the accounting world. There's also a asset management module within that we could use, and they can talk to each other. So in other words, if I put a fixed asset in the finance side in the fixed asset module, it can copy over into the regular asset management. That's kind of confusing, I know, but when we have an item that's past useful life, we still have to keep it in our inventory, right? So accounting's not having to depreciate it and track it that way. We still have to have it in our inventory and report it to the federal government. So our suggestion, our recommendation was that Indigo look at that piece within the D365 module to look at asset management to see if we can't move off of spreadsheets and keep that database in that system, or the federal government has a free system that they're now rolling out available to people to agencies that they can track in. So would it be easier for us to track it in the separate federal system or part of our D365? Our recommendation is that Indigo staff look at those and see what might best work. And so the manager of our special projects and regional mobility wrote a response that they definitely will look at those. They have staff in place that can do a comparison of systems, and they hope to select the software that we can manage that in by June of 2026. Any question on that? The next one is observation number 3, replacement insurance. And I know as board members, you recently heard our risk and safety department talk about our replacement insurance and putting that into place. We did look at the replacement insurance, and during the 2023 board directors meeting, we noted that there was an action item that allowed the CFO to be able to select if we use full replacement insurance or if we use actual cash value insurance. So the board gave them that option to determine which would be the best practice for Indigo. I'm happy to report that based upon the market analysis that they did and the brokerage work that they did, it was more cost effective for Indigo to be able to use complete replacement cost value method for this insurance period. So there's no recommendations for that. They're doing their due diligence and determining which is the best process for Indigo and that make sure that we're fully insured. Any questions on the replacement cost insurance? Our last observation was depreciation on useful life. And Darius, this will answer some of your questions, I hope. So in the accounting world, prior to us getting the Microsoft AX product and the D365 product, we were managing all of our fixed assets on spreadsheets and determining its useful life based upon the federal government and how much we can depreciate annually through the length of the asset's age. And so that was done manually. And then every year we would post in the ledgers the depreciation value. So since we went to the Microsoft AX, and then since migrated into D365, that fixed asset module does that process for us. So we have a fixed asset accountant. They are able to monthly run depreciation. And when the fixed assets put in, the useful life of the fixed assets built in, the cost of the fixed assets built in. And so then each month they can depreciate 1/12 of that year's depreciation and post it in the ledgers to make sure that our financial records represent correctly our depreciated value and our expense. So that's been taken care of. The only time it's not done monthly is during the annual financial audit at the first of the year. They wait 2 months because based upon what the auditors may turn out, if they had to make an adjustment or not. And then they do a catch up and they do it monthly. So to answer your question, I put a little chart here. These are some of the useful standards for FTA grants that are typically used here at Indigo. So for example, a large heavy transit bus, which is most of our fixed out route buses and our BRT buses, their average life expectancy is 12 years. So that's what the FTA says. We depreciate the cost of our bus over a 12-year period or 500,000 miles. A medium light duty, that would be like our paratransit buses. That's 5 years or 150,000 miles. And then I gave an example of fare boxes and our shelters and stops and facilities. So facilities are considered a 40-year depreciation schedule. We've determined that all of those things are put in the fixed asset module correctly. And every month they're doing depreciation and posting it to our ledgers. So we have no recommendation on that piece.
Thanks for that clarity.
Any questions on the fixed asset management?
We do 1501, because that's way more than 40 years old.
It's probably full. Cesar, can you answer? Is 1501 fully depreciated? It is.
So then you just don't, you're done after 40 years?
If they would do a build on or something, right, then you have to take that piece of it and determine a new, like if we added a wing.
Building, that started the clock for 40 years? Thank you.
Same with our bus stops and shelters and stations. Any other questions on that?
I don't think so. Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Next, we have 2 information items. Information item I2 is the Governance and Audit Work Plan Status Report 2020 through 2025. Internal Auditor of Governance and Audit, Amy Summers, will provide information on this item.
Okay, we're winding down. As you can see from the first page on the chart, we have 6 reviews scheduled for Q3. Pretty heavy load. As also we have 4 of us coming in to present as well. So we're looking to try to consolidate, condense reporting maybe as best we can for those 6 reviews. But we may end up moving maybe security of all facilities review, maybe to Q4, as we did a previous review nearly 3 years ago, like 2022. And then possibly could move the rehire eligibility review to, because that process is currently under evaluation. So those might be ones that might be slide into the next quarter, but we've already started and just waiting on a couple items to complete the customer comment one as well. So we're looking for ways to not maybe keep you here for 8 hours. Anyway, so so again, that might kind of shift a little bit, but the next page is our tracking that I do personally for the prior audit findings and the reports that we have outstanding issues that we're still carrying forth to make sure they get addressed. We have a total of 8 reports spanning from just 2023 to 2025. Total observations are 32. And then 16 of those have been closed. 14 remain open and 2 we are considered past due, but we've been carrying those over for a couple quarters and made you guys aware of those as well. There's a reason why they are past due and we're carrying them until they get corrected. But then I do want to note that one observation on here has been cleared, so that'll fall off since the time we input this information for board or reporting here. It's since been corrected. So, and then we have another one that's going to come off too, based on it. So you'll see those modifications next quarter. So, and then the final page is, there are 56 audits and it's basically just tallies what we've done to date in governance and audit. So that should, anybody have any questions on that? Okay.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Amy. Last up is information item I3 is the Ethics Hotline Summary Report. Director of Governance and Audit, Brian Atkinson, will provide information on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Brian Atkinson, Director of Governance and Audit. As we report quarterly, we have continued having the Ethical Advocate Hotline and website available for all of our employees. I personally meet with every new hire class, provide that information. We provide them also cards with the way to contact the toll-free number to report anything that they believe unethical is occurring. And the website, we also have posters throughout our facilities at high traffic areas. During the last quarter, from April 1 to June 30th, we had 4 items to report. 2 were through the website and 2 were other methods that we just got a plain email. That's what happened. And so we did substantiate one of those as a policy violation, which has been corrected. 3 of them are unsubstantiated. So they were determined that they were not an ethics violation. It was something being reported that we just had to have a correction on. There was no ethics thing happening. So if you look at, that was a total of our 4 for the quarter. If you look at the middle section of that chart, it just shows like when those happened. So we have like 1 item in the last 30 days that's under investigation, but I'm happy to report that. So as of June 30th, that was an open item. We closed it this week. We did a lot of background check and background information and pulling data. It was a report of a misuse of a vehicle, and we determined based upon the mileage of the vehicle, we were able to pull GPS reports of the vehicle. We determined that there was nothing out of the ordinary being done with that vehicle. So we determined that was not an ethics violation. So we're in pretty good shape. Out of 4, we only had 1 thing that we substantiated and resolved. Any questions on the ethics hotline?
I don't think so. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate your report. That brings us to the end of our agenda. All the items discussed today will be entered into the record as a part of the Governance and Audit Department report at the full board meeting next week. With nothing else, that'll adjourn our meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.